Hi, everybody. The scorching sun rose over America with an unusual intensity. Before noon, sidewalks shimmered under waves of heat. Parking lots looked like they were melting. Roads radiated blistering temperatures, and the air itself felt heavy to breathe. In city after city, emergency alerts warned residents to stay indoors, drink water, and avoid unnecessary travel. Hospitals treated people suffering from heat exhaustion. Elderly residents, homeless families, and outdoor workers faced the greatest danger. Air conditioning units struggled to keep homes cool as electricity demand surged across the country. But amid the relentless heat, something unexpected began to happen. Across several American cities, mosques quietly opened their doors, not only for Muslims, but for anyone seeking relief. Inside, the atmosphere was completely different. Cool air replaced the suffocating heat outside. Volunteers handed out bottles of cold water, fresh fruit, and simple meals. Children played safely while exhausted travelers rested on clean carpets. No one was asked about their religion. No one was questioned about their background. Everyone was welcome. For many Americans, it was their very first time stepping inside a mosque. Some arrived simply because they needed a cool place to escape the dangerous temperatures. Others had heard from neighbors that local mosques were offering free assistance during the heat wave. What they discovered surprised them. Instead of the stereotypes they had seen online or in movies, they found smiling faces, warm greetings, and volunteers eager to help complete strangers. Questions soon began to emerge. Why are they helping everyone? What motivates these people? Is this what Islam teaches? Simple conversations started over cups of cold water. Visitors asked about the architecture, the prayer hall, and the Arabic calligraphy on the walls. Volunteers patiently answered every question, explaining that caring for neighbors, feeding the hungry, and protecting human life are important values in Islam. For some visitors, this brief encounter would become more than just an escape from the heat. It would become the beginning of a journey they never expected. As America's historic heat wave continued, an even more remarkable story was quietly unfolding behind the doors of its mosques. A story not only about surviving extreme weather, but about compassion, understanding, and people discovering Islam through acts of kindness. As the heat wave intensified, the situation became even more desperate. Day after day, temperatures remained dangerously high. Cooling centers in several communities reached capacity, while many people without reliable air conditioning searched for any place where they could safely escape the relentless heat. Across different parts of the United States, something extraordinary continued to unfold. Mosques became more than places of worship. They became places of refuge. Long before the afternoon heat reached its peak, volunteers were already preparing tables filled with cold bottled water, fresh fruit, snacks, and simple meals. Some mosques set up medical stations where visitors could check their blood pressure or receive first aid for heat-related illnesses. No registration, no entrance fee, no questions about religion. Everyone was welcome. Families carrying exhausted children walked through the mosque doors with visible relief. Elderly visitors found comfortable places to sit beneath powerful air conditioners. Construction workers stopped by after hours under the blazing sun. Even people who had never spoken to a Muslim before found themselves welcomed with smiles and genuine hospitality. Many visitors admitted they had expected something completely different. Instead, they were greeted with kindness. Volunteers patiently explained that helping people in need is considered an important act of worship in Islam. They emphasized that compassion is not reserved only for fellow Muslims. It extends to neighbors, travelers, and anyone facing hardship. These conversations left a lasting impression. Some visitors began asking questions they had never considered before. Why would complete strangers do all this for us? What does the Quran teach about helping others? Can anyone visit a mosque? Rather than delivering speeches, the volunteers simply answered with honesty and invited visitors to observe. Many watched as Muslims paused throughout the day for prayer. They noticed the peaceful silence, the rows of worshippers standing shoulder to shoulder, and the sense of discipline and humility that filled the prayer hall. For some, it was their first real encounter with Islam, not through television, headlines, or social media, but through personal experience. Outside, the streets remained scorching. Inside, something far more powerful than air conditioning was changing hearts. What began as a search for shelter was becoming a search for understanding. And for a number of visitors, that unexpected journey was only just beginning. For many visitors, leaving the mosque was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. Days after the heat wave eased in some areas, many returned, not because they needed air conditioning, but because they wanted answers. The kindness they had experienced stayed with them. They remembered the volunteers who offered water without expecting anything in return. They remembered being welcomed without judgment. Most of all, they remembered one simple question that kept echoing in their minds. What inspires people to show this level of compassion? Curiosity quickly turned into conversation. Mosques began organizing open house events, community dinners, and question and answer sessions for anyone interested in learning more about Islam. Visitors were free to ask anything from daily prayers and fasting to the meaning of the Quran and the role of charity in Muslim life. There was no pressure, only dialogue. Many attendees admitted that their previous understanding of Islam had come almost entirely from television, social media, or headlines. Now, for the first time, they were hearing directly from ordinary Muslim families, students, doctors, teachers, and business owners. The contrast was striking. Instead of fear, they found friendship. Instead of hostility, they found hospitality. Instead of stereotypes, they found real people. Some visitors accepted a free copy of the Quran to read at home. Others signed up for introductory classes about Islam or returned every weekend to continue asking questions. For a few, these conversations became deeply personal. They spoke about finding peace after years of searching for purpose. They described feeling welcomed by a community they had once misunderstood. Some eventually chose to embrace Islam after careful reflection in their own spiritual journey, while many others simply left with a greater understanding and respect for the faith. The heat had brought people through the mosque doors, but compassion was what made many of them come back. As more stories spread throughout local communities, people began realizing that something remarkable had happened. What started as a response to an extreme heat wave had quietly become a bridge between neighbors, cultures, and faiths, and the impact was only beginning to grow. As the weeks passed, the stories continued to spread. People who had once entered a mosque only to escape the scorching heat were now returning with friends, neighbors, and family members. Word of the warm welcome and community service reached far beyond the neighborhoods where the heat wave had first struck. Local residents began sharing their experiences. Some said they had never imagined a mosque would become one of the safest and most welcoming places during a crisis. Others spoke about how simple acts of kindness had challenged years of assumptions about Islam and Muslims. One visitor reflected, "I came here looking for air conditioning. I left with a completely different view of Islam." Another said, "No one tried to force anything on me. They simply cared about people. That made me want to learn more." These conversations created new friendships. Community dinners brought together people from different faiths and backgrounds. Volunteers worked side by side to distribute food, water, and essential supplies to anyone affected by the extreme weather. The mosque had become more than a place of worship. It had become a symbol of unity during a time of crisis. For some individuals, learning about Islam became an important part of their personal spiritual journey. After months of reading, asking questions, and reflecting, a number chose to embrace Islam. Others did not convert, but expressed a deeper appreciation for the faith and for their Muslim neighbors. The greatest change was not measured in numbers. It was measured in trust. Barriers that had existed for years began to disappear through simple human kindness. The heat wave had tested communities across America. Yet, In the middle of that hardship, countless ordinary people discovered that compassion could build bridges where fear once stood. And as these inspiring stories continued to spread, one final chapter remained. A lesson about how a moment of crisis became an opportunity for understanding, hope, and lasting friendship. Eventually, the temperatures began to fall. The weather forecasts no longer carried extreme heat warnings, and life across many American communities slowly returned to normal. Streets became busy again, parks filled with families, and the emergency cooling centers gradually closed their doors. But one place continued to welcome visitors: the mosques. People who had first arrived seeking relief from the unbearable heat were now returning for entirely different reasons. Some attended community dinners, others joined educational programs, interfaith discussions, or simply stopped by to greet the friends they had made during those difficult weeks. The relationships built during the crisis did not disappear when the weather changed. They grew stronger. Many local communities praised the efforts of Muslim volunteers who had worked tirelessly to provide water, meals, shelters, and comfort to anyone in need. Their actions became a reminder that kindness often speaks louder than words. For many visitors, the experience changed how they viewed Islam. Some continued their journey of learning, reading the Quran, asking questions, and exploring the faith at their own pace. A number eventually embraced Islam after personal reflection, while many others gained a deeper respect for Muslim neighbors and a better understanding of Islamic values. The greatest lesson was simple. People's opinions are often shaped by what they hear, but hearts are often changed by what they experience. A glass of cold water, a place to rest, a smile from a stranger. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion leave the deepest impact. The story of America's extreme heat wave became more than a story about record-breaking temperatures. It became a story about humanity, a story about communities standing together in a time of crisis, a story about strangers becoming friends. And for some, it became the first chapter of a lifelong spiritual journey. In the end, the heat wave reminded everyone one timeless truth: when compassion opens the door, understanding often walks in.